Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, we're going to react to the SUMMERLAND disaster. I have no idea what this is about, but I mean, judging from the name of the channel that made this video, I'm guessing it's going to be some kind of true sort of history, horror sort of thing that happened. Kind of like do you remember Mr. B. Allen? Remember his types of videos? That kind of dark history type of thing. I've not done a video like this in a really long time. Horror is probably one of my favorite genres, and there's probably nothing better than like real life horror. So yeah, hopefully this is interesting. Okay, fascinating horror.
On the 2nd of August 1973, three boys were playing on the miniature golf course outside the SUMMERLAND Leisure Centre on the Isle of Man. They ducked into an empty ticket booth so that they could share a cigarette. The oldest boy in the group was just 14.
14 and they're smoking?
Their only worry at the time was being caught smoking, but they would soon have bigger concerns. A dropped match started a fire, which grew rapidly out of control. Panicking, the three boys fled. They would live to see another day, but dozens of people who were inside SUMMERLAND when the fire began would not.
No.
Constructed in 1971, SUMMERLAND was a unique complex, considered extremely advanced for its time. The building, large enough to accommodate 10,000 people, consisted of a swimming pool, also known as the Aquadrome, multiple restaurants and bars, a miniature golf course, a solarium, a theatre, an underground disco, a sauna, a roller skating rink, a small fairground, and an amusement arcade. All of this was set across 5 floors in an ultra-modern building constructed mainly from metal and plastic, the bold design of which, a promotional pamphlet boasted, would set the architectural world alight. It was
Sounds like an amazing little venue, to be fair. Had like a lot of stuff, like a lot of attractions. I'd probably go there.
Intended to be a one-stop, centralised holiday location, one that could compete with sunnier destinations abroad. Inside SUMMERLAND, it never rained, the wind never blew, and the temperature was never anything less than perfect. Visitors could spend the entire day inside, basking under an artificial sun, swimming in artificial pools, and enjoying a round-the-clock roster of entertainment. There was nothing else like it in the world. Of course, people flocked to the venue, 500,000 in its first year.
Wow.
From 1971 until 1973, many happy memories were made within the plastic walls of the complex. It was hailed by the British Tourist Authority as an outstanding tourist enterprise, a destination.
It's a really good idea. I think there's a couple of things in the UK similar, like Butlins, but nothing quite like this.
That was close to home and yet offered boundless entertainment and a tropical climate.
Is there anything in America?
For a few short years, SUMMERLAND thrived. Then, at the height of summer in 1973, the complex burned. At around 7:50 p.m. on the 2nd of August, 3 boys on holiday from Liverpool accidentally started a fire while sneaking a smoke on the miniature golf course. Panicking, they fled the scene, and the fire they had started consumed the kiosk they had been hiding in, causing it to slump against the wall of SUMMERLAND. Staff were called to the scene by worried patrons, but their response was less than ideal. They could see that the fire was licking against the outside wall of SUMMERLAND, but as far as they knew, the walls were fireproof. To them, then, this fire wasn't a serious issue. It was relatively small, and it was outside the complex. Certainly no cause for a mass evacuation. Instead, staff tried to fight the fire with extinguishers, hoses, and poles.
Not enough.
A lack of any real fire safety training meant that none of them placed a call to the fire brigade. They simply weren't sure whose responsibility it was to do so, and were, in any case, sure that they could handle things themselves.
Just call 999.
Little did these staff members know that the fire was already inside the building, feeding on flammable building materials in a hidden gap between the outer and inner walls. There, unseen, it spread outward and upward, and burned hotter and hotter until, very suddenly, it burst through into the main building. At this point in time, despite the fire outside sending a huge plume of smoke into the air, new guests were still being admitted through the entrance turnstiles. The fire brigade had still not been called by anyone at the complex, although the sight of smoke had prompted people miles away to raise the alarm. Indeed, one call came via the harbour master, who was alerted by the captain of a ship out at sea. No guest inside the complex could have known that there was any cause for alarm, until, with shocking suddenness, flames erupted from the walls and raced along the ceiling of the arcade.
Oh my god.
A panicked scramble for the exits began. In many cases, staff members, who'd barely had any fire safety training, were of little help. A ride operator fled the fairground without switching off the rides, leaving several children to be rescued from a moving carousel by their parents and other onlookers. Elsewhere, an entertainer confidently assured patrons that the smoke was from nothing worse than a chip pan fire, and convinced them to remain in their seats, only to realise the severity of the situation just moments later, and
honestly, even if they told me to stay put, after what happened at the Grenfell disaster, I'm running. I'm sorry. I'm gonna run. You just, you don't know for sure.
Begin screaming for people to run. Conditions within the building quickly became unimaginable. Firstly, the nature of the complex meant that many of the people within were part of family groups, but family groups that had felt quite happy to separate. While children enjoyed a magic show, parents might have gone up to another floor to relax in the solarium. When the fire burst into the building proper, then, many people began to frantically search for their families rather than to evacuate through the nearest exit. Secondly, there were only a small number of exits readily available. The rest were locked, and in some cases chained shut, ostensibly to prevent people from sneaking in without paying the entrance fee. Keys for emergency exits were supposed to be stored in glass-fronted boxes beside each set of doors, but in many cases these boxes were empty, or were situated so high up on the wall that they were out of reach for most people. In one instance, a set of fire doors was blocked by a parked car outside the building, a car that, with horrible irony, belonged to SUMMERLAND's safety officer.
Oh my god.
In many cases,
dude.
In order to escape, guests had to smash windows and batter open doors with whatever was available.
Why were the building materials so flammable? I mean, wasn't it constructed out of concrete? Like, mostly, did they use wood, I'm guessing? Like, plastic, perhaps?
Finally, escaping guests had to contend with the material from which SUMMERLAND was built. The majority of the building was clad in a kind of plastic sheeting known as Oroglass. Survivors would later come to refer to it as horror glass.
Oh my god.
During the fire, it melted, dripping down and burning people who were trying to flee the smoke and flames. The vast majority of deaths occurred within the main part of the building. Being open plan in design, there was nothing to stop the spread of the fire, or to offer protection from smoke and hot gases. Many people died or were injured as they tried to descend from one level to another down staircases that were narrow and unprotected. Such was the crush around the few available staircases that some parents threw their children from the balconies in the hope that someone below would catch them. Many people jumped, with a few brave staff members remaining at their posts until the last possible moment to catch people jumping from upper levels.
Doesn't this remind you of, what happened like on 9/11 in a sense? Like, obviously nowhere near the scale, but just, the desperation of the people to get out of the fire, jumping, throwing their kids just for other people to catch them, just pure desperation and horror.
One staff member even doused himself in water from a fire extinguisher so that he could stay inside the building and assist escaping guests for longer.
Wow.
Throughout it all, no alarm sounded. The fire
Insane.
had burned through the control circuit before it could be triggered.
Have they not called the line?
The fire service
fire
arrived and tackled the
Finally.
blaze, using
Finally.
water from the swimming pool and then from the sea to damp down the flames. The injured were ferried to a nearby hospital by ambulances which operated like shuttles, moving back and forth for 2 solid hours until the last seriously injured victim had been transported. By midnight, the rescue operation was over, and the fire service turned to the retrieval of bodies, a harrowing process that would take several days. In the end, 50 people lost their lives in the fire,
Oh
and
my
80
God.
more sustained serious injuries.
50.
An investigation was launched and identified a wealth of failings. Exits should not, under any circumstances, have been chained shut. Staff should have been given fire safety training. The fire service should have been called within 1 minute of the fire outside the building being discovered. Mistake after mistake had been made, but the greatest errors had taken place long before Summerland was even open to the public. Because of budgetary issues during construction, multiple firms had worked on the building. The company which built the outer shell hadn't known with any certainty how the interior would be divided up, and so hadn't been able to place fire exits appropriately. Additionally, it is believed that the firm which handled the interior fitting out of Summerland might have inadvertently undone some of the fireproofing carried out by the firm which built the exterior.
I suppose in the 70s, that regulations for construction were probably a lot more lax. They weren't as developed as they are now. They didn't probably have as much, if any, data, to go by. So I'm not saying none of it's their fault, but you probably have to use different standards to kind of judge them.
As well as this, materials had been chosen that were cost-effective, but which weren't sufficiently fireproof. Boroglass,
cheap.
for example, had been approved despite its flammability, on the basis that it would soften and fall out of its frame in the case of a fire, facilitating escape. The fire safety budget had been a matter of contention, with owners repeatedly seeking cheaper options. Sprinklers were not installed because to do so throughout the building would simply cost too much.
Wow.
Again and again, communication had failed, and decisions had been taken which prioritized convenience or cost reduction over human life. But despite all this, the investigation concluded that nobody was to blame.
What? Obviously the owners had some blame in this. Of course they did. They should have had sprinklers.
There were no villains, said the report, only many human errors and failures. This judgment, incidentally, was applied equally to the 3 boys who started the fire. They were identified and brought before a judge, where they were fined £3 each, about
What?
£30 each in today's money.
Mad. Absolutely mad.
The burned shell of Summerland was, eventually, demolished and rebuilt. The new Summerland was smaller and constructed from traditional materials, with a state-of-the-art alarm and sprinkler system. It eschewed the open-plan design of its predecessor and opted instead for a lower and more compartmentalized building. This new Summerland was a reflection of the impact that the fire had on the construction industry. Every lesson learned and new rule implemented was reflected in its design. The new Summerland epitomized a changed attitude towards fire safety in leisure and entertainment buildings. However, a flood in 2002 gutted the new complex, leading to its eventual demolition. Now all that remains of Summerland is a scarred cliff face. It should be hoped that the lessons learned from the fire, at such great cost, do not disappear so easily.
Man, oh man, what a story. It's just sad how business owners and large corporations will often put profits before people. I mean, most of the time, to be honest with you. I'm reading the top comment here. The fire burned through the fire alarms before they could go off. That just feels like a terrible joke. I mean, surely the materials that you build the fire alarms out of will be not melt proof, because I think every material has a melting point, but you need those to be able to withstand intense heat because that's their job. Just the amount of corners cut, like using that aura glass or whatever it is, you know, I've never even heard of aura glass. Why would you not think, you know, like it's a holiday venue. People are going to be, especially in the 70s, people are going to be smoking. People are going to be, you know, like you've got saunas in there. You've got places in there where there's intense heat. You've obviously got restaurants in there. So there's going to be, you know, lots of high heat in the kitchens and stuff. The fact that they kind of just hoped that there wouldn't be a fire ever in that place just seems so naive, criminally naive to me. And the fact that they got away with not even a slap on the wrist, basically just you know, bad people, it's just ridiculous. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.